Welcome to part 2 of Imagined Architectures, a micro series of YouTube where I, Owen, talk about architecture and film. And this week we're doing some voyeurism, courtesy of Rear Window by Alfred Hitchcock. Take it away. Here's a contradiction. Cities allow you to become anonymous, perhaps even invisible. But you also become entirely exposed to prying eyes and observation. People watching in a city is a kind of pleasant pastime. In a village, it's considered weird. Okay, there's also a poetry to it. Think 19th century Paris, the flaneurs. What began as a slightly ambivalent literary type, the 1872 Grand Dictionary called it a mixture of curiosity and laziness, would become a sort of philosophical obsession. Balzac, novelist, described this kind of urban wandering and looking to be a gastronomy of the eye. More interestingly, Victor Fournel, another Frenchman of course, called it a mobile and passionate photograph. Remember that. Baudelaire, the poet, got in on it. Even Edgar Allan Poe. Walter Benjamin, in his essay on Baudelaire, described the flaneur as a kind of essential ingredient of modern urban experience. Here's Baudelaire himself. The crowd is his element. He's talking about the flaneur. The crowd is his element, as the air is that of birds and water of fishes. His passion and his profession are to become one with the crowd. For the perfect flaneur, for the passionate spectator, it is an immense joy to set up house in the heart of the multitude, amid the ebb and flow of movement, in the midst of the fugitive and the infinite. To be away from home, and yet to feel oneself everywhere at home. To see the world, to be at the centre of the world, and yet to remain hidden from the world. Interesting. Now, back to Benjamin. He described this figure, this flaneur, as a sign of alienation within the city and of capitalism, kind of amateur detective and investigator of its ills, and the act of looking itself was kind of evidence of this unwellness. I mean, this all brings us transplanted across time and space to New York, to Hitchcock's Rear Window, 1954. The setup is simple. L.B. Jeffries, a world-weary photographer, has broken his leg on assignment, hit by a car. Fully just obliterated his leg, meaning he is trapped alone in his summer-hot New York apartment, visited only by a straight-talking nurse, Stella, and his social butterfly of a girlfriend, Lisa, played by Grace Kelly. And I actually think that L.B. Jeffries is played by James Stewart. James Stewart is at his best here, curmudgeonly but charming and obsessive. You forget that he was just very good at being a bit unscrewed. I like it. And really you have to like it, because spatially, this film, Rear Window, takes place almost entirely within the confines of his apartment, making us, the viewer, sort of coincident, overlapping with Jeffries himself. He's broken his leg, and so have we. Where he rolls, we roll. Where he sees, we see. Hitchcock's camera is often conflated with the point of view of Jeffries himself. It tracks, pans, squints, obsesses, as if we're seeing right through his eyeballs. He ogles a ballet dancer. He peeks voyeuristically at a lonesome spinster. It is a defiantly erotic film. This is summer. It's hot, baking, so everybody has their windows and blinds thrown open. What's interesting, of course, is that Jeffries himself, as far as we know, never necessarily becomes an object of observation himself. For much of the film, no spoilers, we never catch anybody else looking at him while he's looking at them. Scroll up. That's Baudelaire. to be at the centre of the world and yet to remain hidden from the world. The ultimate flaneur, then, he exists sort of above and away from the human passions and follies that unfold beneath his gaze. You might call it a savvy nod to the role of the filmmaker themselves, they who see yet remain unseen. Truffaut, another great filmmaker and another Frenchman, also made this comparison. Jeffries' telephoto lens, because he brings out his huge camera, he's a photographer, remember, is no different from the director's. And our kind of enjoyment, morbid curiosity of looking through the lens at other people's lives, that's film. This, of course, speaks kind of well to Benjamin's point that the flaneur can only really emerge under conditions of alienation. Jeffries is not really a happy man. While successful, his work brings him little monetary success. It is a grueling life on the road. Cynically cleaved from his fellow man, he can only watch, ignoring the possibility of happiness and human connection that's actually right beneath his feet. I'm speaking, of course, about his doting, sociable girlfriend, whom he rebuffs for much of the film and finds endless fault with. Come on, mate. But this restricted perspective, jammed up and from within Jeffrey's apartment, should really throw up a red flare. What he sees of the world is conditioned by his own constraints. Here they are physical as well as psychological. This is, I guess, a kind of undiluted gaze, all of it packaged and parcelled through this very tight point of view editing style. It becomes claustrophobic, unnervingly so. And that all depends really on these formal constraints. The frustration of what we can't see as well as what we can see, and our desire to kind of look through X-ray-like the walls when someone passes beyond it. Lights being turned on and off, blinds shut, people walking behind a wall. All of these things become a kind of motif of frustration. Yeah, a word on space. This isn't a real slice of New York. It's a soundstage that has been dressed up, fabricated to look like a city block. Distant skyscrapers blur in their cardboard vagary. The whole world is a stage. And really, props to the set dressing team who created here a truly living and breathing architecture. A rabbit warren of sliced perspectives and inlets and angles. We can even glimpse through onto a street below, through a passageway. There's a restaurant there. Those tables are busy with life. People come and go along the street. The entire set is this immense choreography. And the architecture, again, kind of constrained, while at the same time being really, really open, instrumentalizes Jeffries an hour gazing. It enables it and kind of disables it at the same time. Stephen Jacobs describes this formulation of the architecture as becoming a kind of, or representing a kind of perspectival perhaps, machine. Perspectival machine. I like that. A panopticon or a theatre. Yeah, a quick note on the production. So, film was shot entirely at Paramount Studios. Huge indoor set that replicated this Greenwich Village courtyard. Set designers were Hal Pereira and Joseph McMillan. They spent 6 weeks building this huge, complicated, detailed set, which kind of functioned like a real urban block. It had drainage, huge drainage system to account for the rain, which falls on the city. It took about 6 weeks to build for $100,000, funnily enough. And it was based on a real New York courtyard, though, which is interesting. It contains, I think, about 31 individual apartments that we see into, 12 of which are like regular apartments that we consistently see into and witness the lives of the people within them. And Grace Sprague, who's a designer, was an uncredited advisor on creating these worlds. You know, it meant that Hitchcock had to create each apartment in this uniquely personal way. The furniture, the colour of the paint on the walls, the objects and materials within those apartments had to represent the individuality of the persons within it. So it was very obvious when the camera's looking through that window, when we're looking through that window, that we recognise that it belongs to a unique, a very different person. It's miraculous, right? But this is also a rear window. This isn't the view people are presenting publicly. We're seeing people's privacies, their lowest and basest moments, in theory. We're witnessing their refuges from the world. A lot of these people are lonely and unsatisfied. There's a tortured artist, there's a not so tortured artist, there's a bickering newlywed couple, there's another bickering couple. And it's this couple that much of the film fascinates itself with, because L.B. Jeffries believes he has witnessed a murder, just not the act itself. And while through the film Jeffries attempts to unpick this possible crime, he also scours his own conscience, the ethics of peeking and peering. How much can you really deduce from what people do at home alone at night? His friend, a police detective, challenges him on this. His girlfriend challenges him on it. But they all become wrapped up in this kind of game of perspectival cat and mouse. They'll get pulled in even despite their initial reservations, their ethical quandaries. They all become obsessed with this voyeurism, as do we, because it's gripping watching, right? It's an exciting film. Indulging your morbid curiosity about the lives of others, even if it's towards ostensibly, good moral ends to solve a murder. A moral boundary is being crossed. I think Hitchcock is ultimately ambivalent about that. People throw around the idea of the male gaze inherent in this film, but I think it's a bit wider than that. We're kind of witnessing the proximity of delight and terror. Jeffries enjoys peeking and being a voyeur. And the murder, if it has happened, is something he almost desires, however bleakly to have happened, There's a kind of creepy, eerie desire for this thing to have happened. He becomes pulled into its possibility. The voyeurism becomes kind of erotically exciting. Something to lift his alienated spirits away from the morass of cocktail parties and fine dinners that he dismisses. Bear in mind, again, he's a photographer, right? He spends his time going around the world on assignment, not shooting fashion editorials, but shooting war zones and kind of catastrophes, human rights abuses, all this stuff. Frequently we'll see, as we'll see in the film, Jeffries also comes to put Lisa, his girlfriend, in harm's way. He's aware of his own increasing obsession, switching from initially his own eyes, his naked eye, to using a pair of binoculars, to using a huge telephoto lens. He also takes photographs, but we never see him take the photographs, interestingly. We never hear the snap and flash of the camera. We just see him going over the photographs later. So even though this is tightly claustrophobic in interior, this film, there's still moments of photography and shooting which we don't see. This isn't a heroic film, even if the credits kind of wrap with uplifting music. Visual power, the interrelationship between space and looking is really what's at stake here, I think. It's also just really fun. This is Hitchcock at his best, funny and witty, but also quite tragic and obsessive psychologically. His neighbours are going through moments of torment and danger and risk and love and life, and he's really just this kind of ogling weirdo in his soiled pajamas. It's great, it's excellent. It's been remade allegedly in 2008. I haven't seen the remake. It's probably not great, but yeah, that's it. Rear Window. Next time, on these kind of short introductions, we're going to be doing a very different film, but also about claustrophobic capitalist space. It's going to be Die Hard, a Christmas film, as they say. So that would be like the Christmas episode of Imagine Architectures. Anyway, take care, enjoy the film.